Hey guys, welcome to Production Music Live. My name is Johannes Menzel. I'm a techno producer and DJ from Berlin, and I'm running the YouTube channel Ableton Techno Vlog, so maybe some of you guys know me already. And in this video tutorial I want to explain a little bit my latest track Retaliate, which I've been releasing a few days ago on Orange Recordings. So let's go straight into the session. First, I want to go a little bit in detail and talk with you about the tracks and some tips and tricks. And in the end, I want to show you a little bit the arrangement, the idea behind the track and the mastering. The first one in all my projects is the sidechain. It's nothing special, so it's just a very short kind of kick drum sound which is triggering all the sidechain compressors in the whole project. Then there is my kick and bass rack. So maybe some of you guys know already my Ableton standard template. So I'm always using red for kick and bass and yellow for percussions, pink or purple for synthesizers, and white for effects. And also there is some green for claps, which is in this grouped here. The first one is, of course, the kick drum. The most important in techno is the kick drum, in my opinion. In this case, let me first switch off the master chain. And then let me switch off also this chain. I'm going to show you some third-party plugins because this is not released as a template. This is a track I've made. And when I'm making tracks for myself, I don't care really about the amount of third-party plugins I use. So there are some inside. First, the kick drum. The kick drum is a sample from Production Music Live, melodic techno, and it sounds like this. But I've transposed it. This is the original sound. I've transposed it 3 semitones, so let me show you the spectrum. So it's playing a G. Nothing special, some overdrive to increase the overtones here, and also some EQing to cut out some frequencies I don't like. So it sounds a little bit softer with the EQ. The next one is also a kick. So I do not really care about the names of my audio tracks. It's a percussion sample, also transposed 3 semitones, almost the same amount of distortion, or it is exactly the same. I just changed a little bit the filter. I've cut out the low frequencies to have enough space for the kick drum. So this is without and this is with cutting. Now there is the kick, which is the same like the main kick drum, but I've shaped the sample a little bit here. This kick drum is playing the rhythm. Let's call it the sub bass. So together we have this. There is no sidechain compression needed or anything else because I'm just playing when the main kick drum is not playing here. But what I've done here, I've changed the fade in at the sampler, or the simpler in this case, to make the transient of the kick drum super smooth, super soft. So without, it sounds like. And when you fade in, you get this kind of softening effect because you're losing completely the transient, which is here in the beginning. Then some distortion or overdrive, EQing. And the next track is also the kick drum. No, this one is the reverb kick. which is very often used in modern techno sounds and tracks. So it is the same kick drum like the main kick drum, but the difference is also for this one, I haven't transposed it 3 semitones. So this is +3 and this is at 0. I think there are a lot of tutorials explaining how to make rumble and techno, so this is nothing special. It is the kick drum, reverb, overdrive, sidechain compression, EQing, and in the end monoing the sound, because of the reverb you get too much stereo information in the low end, and this is what you want to avoid when you're playing your sounds in a club or somewhere else. So without moaning, it's like, it's super wide. I recommend to use headphones or good speakers where you can hear these frequencies and especially the wideness of the sound, because it's annoying in headphones. So, and then, yeah, some reverb, some EQing, as I mentioned already. And in the end, there's my bass control rack, which I'm using a lot. Well, there is a thunderstorm going on outside. Maybe you guys can hear it in Berlin. So let's switch off the most important stuff, which is Presswerk and Satin. Satin is a tape machine emulation from UHE, and Presswerk is a compressor, which can be also used as limiter and has some super nice saturation on board, some warm sound, and it compresses the kick and the bass and the rumble very nice together. And Satin is for adding some kind of white noise to the sound. I can show you. Okay, the sound is getting much louder, so it feels already better because it's louder, but the most important is the white noise, which you can add here. So I just wanted a tiny bit to have a really dirty kind of bass and kick sound. And Presswerk is making the kick again very loud and compressing all the 4 tracks together. So when I use these plugins for Satin, I just use, most of the time I just use the input and the output controller to make it a little bit clipping and overdriving. And here, to be honest, on Presswerk, I just put in the signal and then I switch the presets, especially the presets which are in bass and in track mixdown. And I just use a lot of these Mojo stuff, and I just play around and try to change the input and the output level and the threshold, maybe add some saturation and warmth to it, and that's it. So after this, there's also some EQing going on where I cut a little bit the bass and the frequency here around 260 Hertz, and then there is an equalizer, which is in mid-side mode, to avoid the stereo information below. Yeah, I've written here something like 300 Hertz, at least 150, but it depends on the sound. So I really try to control until I have the feeling that I'm not losing completely the stereo information from the bass, but I have to cut it here, because if you have ever heard a track with too much stereo in the low end on a sound system in a club, it sounds annoying. It sounds so awful, in my opinion. And then there is a limiter to avoid clipping and to compress the sound even more. So in the end, we have a super compressed kick drum, which has almost no movement here, but this is very typical for techno. That's the kick and the bass. Now let's go into some of the percussion tracks. First, there are some loops from Loopex. Just to make the track a little bit interesting. Sometimes I'm a very lazy guy and I'm using some loops combined together with things I made myself, like this kind of white noise, or just hi-hats from the premium. And combined together, they sound, let's take this part here. So what is really important here is that I'm adding a tiny bit of overdrive on the whole percussions group, like here. Maybe you can see it when I take this one outside. So especially this part, which is the 10K, is increasing because of the overdrive here in front of the rest of the effects. I'm also using the imager to widen the sound a little bit. So just to stereoize the signal and to increase the volume of the side signal here. So it's almost not noticeable, but in the end it makes a difference in the whole track and in the mix down when the percussions are a little bit more on the side, because then you have more space for the kick drum and the bass in the middle of the track. What I've also done here is something, let me check, yeah, this one. It's like there is the main hi-hat, which is, I think it's this one. And I took another one, which sounds like this. Oh no, it opens, so here it is very open. And the secret behind to make it this, I would call it the UMEC or UMEC hi-hat. It's very typical, at least in the last few months, to have this kind of really white noise, distorted kind of hi-hats. So this hi-hat is made from, let me switch all the effects off here, from just a simple sample. And it sounds like this. So what I'm doing here is overdrive and cutting some frequencies, but this is not important. The most important part is the erosion and the frequency shifter and the overdrive here. So with the erosion, it sounds like this. Without. So the erosion makes it wider and white noisier, but in my opinion, the white noise is too harsh or too much here in the spectrum. Like in the 10K area where most of the percussions are already. So I'm using the frequency shifter to take the frequency down and to make it a little bit, let's call it, play it a little bit lower in the spectrum. Yeah, there's also some tiny widening going on here because I'm using an echo with a left and a right delay, which are slightly off, but the feedback is 18%, so it's almost nothing. Makes no difference. So sometimes I just do things when I produce and then I forgot to delete them and then they're in the track and I don't care about anymore. Yeah, so this is the percussions group. In the end of the group, there is also some glue compression going on to compress the sounds together to make the sounds more equal in the loudness. So it feels a little bit more, yeah, the word is glued. This is why the glue compressor is maybe called glue compressor. So as you can hear, hopefully, without, you can hear a little bit more dynamic, and with it's less dynamic. It's just every sound is closer to the other sounds. And it's quieter because I haven't used the makeup here. Sometimes, so as in the kick rack, for example, I don't care about loudness. Everything gets louder and louder and louder from effect to effect. And here it gets quieter. So in the end, I always use these guys here to make my mix down and get the loudness to the right level. Yeah, and now maybe the most important stuff here. Oh no, let's skip this one because this is more complicated, and let's just check the easy stuff here. So I'm using some atmosphere loops from Production Music Live here. This kind of sound, let me group all these together and switch it off. It's just a loop from Production Music Live, and I'm using a lot of effects here to soften the sound, like for example almost 70% of reverb, so the sound gets very soft and long and not as harsh as the original. There's also some movement on the auto filter here with the LFO going on to have some movement in the sound itself. Then the sidechain compression, of course, is important. Then panning from the left to the right and back. This is what I said or mentioned with, it's less harsh after the reverb, because when it comes from the vinyl distortion, then it sounds like this. And after some delay and reverb, it's a very soft sound. So this sound makes, it's just playing the whole song in the background. And I think there is some automation, but just some simple fading on at the beginning, and that's it. This sound makes the track breathing. Let's check. Then we have this one, which is also some atmosphere where it looks like I've copied a lot of the stuff from here. This is what I also do a lot, is when I have my rack like this, which I most of the time create from scratch. Of course, it's almost like always, but sometimes I have some different ideas, like, oh, use some vinyl distortion, oh, use some chorus, whatever. And when this one is done, I try a lot of samples and use the same rack on another track, like this one. And yeah, in the end, it sounds like this. This is the original sound. . So this is for the background noises, and then there are of course some swipe ups and impact risers, whatever, like white noise. And this one is combined with this one, which I made by myself. It's just an operator with some white noise and some FX. So without it sounds like this. Just white noise. And after some reverb and autofilter automation, because without autofilter it sounds like this. And with autofilter and just a simple automation. It's a white noise riser, of course. Yeah, so anything else? Yeah, maybe this one, which is percussion sample. So this one is, let me check the original sound. I have no idea, to be honest. Okay, something weird. Oh, it's transposed, and because of the warping it sounds a little bit weird. But this doesn't matter, because after the reverb, which is almost 10 seconds here, and at 92%, you cannot hear the weird sound anymore. Some delay, EQing, compression. There are a lot of small things in the track to fill the gaps, to make it alive, to make, yeah, like feeling there's something going on below the kick drum and the synthesizers. Yeah, then there is the classic kind of clap, which is just a clap with some reverb, erosion to make it a little bit more white noise-ish. A lot of reverb and some EQing to cut out all the frequencies I don't like and I don't need. Because in the mix, this is very important, when you hear completely in the mix, it makes no difference if it sounds like this. Let me start a little bit more off here. So it makes almost no difference, but it makes a whole difference to cut everything out, which is not necessary here because you have more space for the red stuff, which is going on here. Now let's come to the synthesizers. So there is one sound which is called the drone. There are also some sounds which are switched off here. What is that? I have no idea. As some kind of support synthesizer. So let's start from here. The drone. So the drone, maybe you already heard this one. The drone is the same sound, but with a lot of effects and without the same, it's not the same rhythm. So let me play this one here. Super simple stuff. Yeah, the sound itself comes from a synthesizer, which is more or less a sampler. It's called the Rave Generator and is for free. And the sound is the T99 part 2, whatever preset, which sounds like this. Like. like this, like a classic rave sound from the 90s or whatever, together with all the effects here. Most important is the reverb to make the sound less harsh and to glue it also a little bit together. So here it's just a fast running kind of synthesizer sound. And after the reverb, it's almost like a pad sound. Then I'm using a lot of color copy, which is also from Yuhe, and is a nice echo plug-in, and I really love the 80s Neuer or Neuer whatever preset here, which is crazy. I'm using this in almost all of my sounds now, or of my tracks now. So this is the drone sound. Then there is a lot of sidechain compression. And then some filtering for the arrangement of the track. Yeah, to bring it in and out and down and up and whatever, like here. This one is not used, this one is not used, the whole group 37 is not used, so I was trying something else. Yeah, I can show you. I was trying to play around with vocals, so this is in the drop. I wanted to make something like this. Retaliate. And then bam, but in the end I decided to cut it, and so it's not in the final project anymore. It's a vocal from Production Music Live from Alex, and it's pitched a little bit and has some frequency shifting, chorus and so on going on. Whatever, it's not used in the track, so it's not important in this case. So let's go back to the synthesizers. There is the acid sound. So the acid sound sounds like this. And the acid sound is made of, let me check, 3 layers. Yeah, 3 layers of ABL3, which is TB303 emulation synthesizer. ABL3, yeah. And what I've done here, I've recreated the rhythm and almost the melody from the main synth in the end of the track or after the drop of the track. So I'm introducing the sound with a different sound. I've layered it because the plugin can just play in mono, so just one sound, and I wanted to have something like a top layer, a bottom layer, and I don't know what this is, and a super top layer. So like all the sounds together sound like this. Super weird stuff. And what also is really important is the group on the group, the effects here. So most important, of course, is the chorus. Yeah, the chorus is making from the simple acid sound. So let's switch this one off and let's switch all of these off. These kind of awkward sound. So it was just an idea. I was playing around with this plugin, and in the end I decided to leave it like this. I was struggling a lot with some different synthesizers. What can I make to introduce the main synth without showing the main synth before the drop. And now let's go to the main synth, which is the rave step. It's T99, and this is also the T99 preset from this super sweet rave generator. And without all the stuff here on the group, it sounds like this. So there is not so much going on here. Some overdrive, some cutting, some erosion to add some white noise and some dirt to the sound, and a lot of echo. Also, again, the 80s snare, and then compression and sidechain compression. And then I've layered the sound with this one. Oh, maybe I've switched the wrong track off, right? Yeah, so this is without the FX. So the sound is a little bit more harsh and has a lot of echo now. And here, let's go back to this one because I was wrong. So that's it. And this is the whole track. These are almost all the elements. And sidechain compression also here to have some space for the kick drum and to make the synthesizer a little bit more pumping. I'm also using a lot of reverb here. I'm using the FAB filter with the preset modulated mid dominatio or whatever. I really like this preset on the FAB filter. It is a really, in my opinion, one of the best sounding reverbs. So let's close all these guys and let's listen a little bit and talk about the arrangement. So I classically start my tracks always without the kick. No, the bass, sorry, of course, with the kick, but without bass in the kick. So like this. So there's also the first percussion, deep percussion FX sound here. Then it comes again, and then there is the clap, and then we have the bass. Yeah, then after this one, I've moved the track because then I can start when I export my track a little bit here with a little bit offset in front of the track, which is better. I've noticed that it is not the best way to start in Ableton directly from zero and export the track directly from zero, because sometimes the first transient of the first kick drum is not completely correct and it is cutted or whatever. So this is why in the end, when I'm done with my track, I press Command A, like, let me show you, Command A, and then I put everything, this is impossible, I'm sorry, everything a little bit offset. So now we can put it back, so it's fitting more to the grid now. So here I'm introducing the hi-hats with this white noise-ish hi-hat I've explained before. It has the filter which is opening more and more. And there are also some nice sounds which make the track a little bit more interesting, like this is just a stupid white noise as mentioned before, but it introduces or makes this drop and the starting of the hi-hats a little bit smoother, like not as harsh or as direct, like starting from nothing. I hope you know what I mean. And then there is this small... There's the pre-head. Oh yeah, let's talk about the pre-head. I totally forgot. So the pre-head plays always before the head. So there is the head and the pre-head, as you can see. The pre-head is just like a ghost note. So you have the head and the pre-head, and let's switch on this one as well. I don't know why, I just like it when I'm using it's like a copy of that, and just changed the note a little bit, put it in front and make it very quiet, like minus 41 decibels. And what is also nice here in this track is this one, which is just a preset from the Analog Lab. It is called Signal Red, whatever. I have just used the ability to filter by synth and by SFX and whatever, and in the end I came up with this sound. So there are a lot of small details here in the heads, and then I'm building up. Then after almost 1 minute and 30 seconds, I'm cutting off the bass. And I'm bringing in the acid sound. So where is it? Here. Maybe you're wondering, here are no MIDI clips, so the ABL3 is playing constantly in the background. So this is why I'm cutting totally the signal and just jump here to the frequency where you can hear it. Yeah, if I would change this here in front, it is playing constantly. So I don't know why, but this is how the plugin works. Or maybe I don't know how the plugin works, but for me it's okay, so because I can cut the sound and switch it on and off with a filter or volume automation, whatever. Then there is this kind of small drop where the acid sound comes in. And all the hi-hats and all percussions are gone. So I really like in techno when I get the rough kind of bass and kick sound and maybe some synthesizer stuff going on. Sometimes just bass and kick drums. So in the middle of the track, just bass, nothing else. And this is what I really like. And this is what I do a lot in my tracks. What is also maybe nice to know is on the percussions, I'm using a reverb. The reverb has some automation on the dry wet knob to fade out all the percussions a little bit smoother. Like, let me show you. Maybe it's just a feeling, but I like it more with the reverb. Because it's almost feeling like a white noise riser, because all the white noise-ish kind of percussions are glued together with the reverb to one sound, which is almost white noise. Yeah, then, as mentioned, I'm introducing the acid sound. So this part here before the main build up and drop is almost the same length like the first part here, just with some changes, like I'm using a little bit more percussions and the order is a little bit different, like this one is starting here directly with them together and this one is starting here and so on. And now we come to the most important part of the track. Let's call it the gap. What is really, really important when making music, and if you really want to have a nice and massive drop, it is important to have a really low volume before the drop. The perfect volume is nothing, like just a gap. Like in this case, I'm filtering out all my acid sounds, like you can see here. And there's the gap. Yeah, and then there comes the rave step, just a single loop and then with the kick drum. And that's the outro. So I would say from 0 to 57 we have the intro, then here there is something like the main part, part 1, the main part, part 2, and then there is the outro. So that's the track. Now let's talk a little bit about the master chain, and hopefully you are a little bit better in producing techno after this video. So my master chain, I'm just using Ozone 8 in this case. Some of my tracks I'm also using a little bit of OTT compression and EQing, but in this case, okay, EQing is maybe done here. No, it's not. But what I'm doing here is I have some plugins to visualize what I want to hear. Yeah, of course I have my studio and I have my ears and I have my experience, but in the end I like to control myself with some reference stuff. And in this case I've made a preset for tonal balance control. I called it Techno. So I took from, I don't know, 10 or 7 techno tracks I really like, just small pieces from the middle of the track or somewhere else where everything is playing, and I used tonal balance control to make this kind of curve or this kind of EQ target curve from it. This is what I always put in my master chain, and I'm also doing mastering for friends, and I asked them to please send me some references from really well-known artists. And then I make a new analyze file and I use tonal balance control to master their tracks. Because in the end, after producing and always hearing your own sound, maybe your ears are tired or you're listening totally wrong or whatever. So it's nice to know if you're totally wrong or if you're somehow in the target curve you want to be. So this is tonal balance control. Yeah, tonal balance control. Let me show you here. So I'm just comparing, of course, my track where almost everything is playing. So to compare it here at the beginning is totally nonsense, of course. Because there's just bass, no mid, no high end, and maybe here you can try to compare as well. So in this track it looks good, of course, because it's already mixed and mastered by myself. And what I'm also doing is I'm using this one. It's a free plugin. It's Yulin Loudness Meter. You can show the LUFS scale also here in the ozone. But on this one, you can scroll through the whole track and check if everything is okay. So my target here is something below 7.5. Better 7, but in this case I went very loud. I don't know why. So to explain this one a little bit, the more you get with the value from minus to 0, the less dynamics your track have. So I would recommend for techno and for playing tracks in a club, something between 9 and maximum minus 6. Better is minus 7. So this track is really, really loud. As you can see, it's red here. But anyhow, this is how I made it. So the track is also released in my mastered version. So the label was not using an additional guy to do the masterings because I think they liked the way I did my job, hopefully. And yeah, now the last one in the chain, not the last one, it's the first one. The last one is, of course, loudness meter and tonal balance control, is the ozone. So I'm not using the equalizer here. In some of my other projects, I just use it to, for example, decrease a tiny bit here the bass frequencies, because mostly my tracks are a little bit too bass heavy. In this case, I haven't done anything with this one. Then there is the imager. The imager is to, again, put everything below, let's say in this case, 200 Hertz to mono. So we can listen here just by soloing this one. I hope you can hear the difference, because for this I think you need good speakers or at least some headphones. But there is a difference between this and this. Of course, it is visible as well. We just need a line here at the bottom, because this makes sure you can play it on really big speakers without having any issues. Then there is the band 2, which is, let's call the low top whatever part, which is most of the synthesizer and all stuff. And there I've done nothing. And then there is the band 3 and 4, which is the top end of the track, and I've increased the stereo width here a tiny bit and here a little bit more. So this is the imager, dynamic equalizer. So I'm just looking for frequencies I don't like, and I don't want to cut them completely. So this is why I'm using the dynamic equalizer. And it makes, in the end, in my opinion, it makes the track a little bit more clear compared to without dynamic EQ. And this is again very subtle, just a tiny bit, because in mastering you don't want to change the sound of the track, you just want to make it louder. That's it. When you want to change the sound of the track, go back to producing or to mixing. Then the vintage limiter, which is doing almost nothing here. I've learned from mastering that sometimes it makes sense to use 2 limiters in a row, especially, for example, the Ableton limiter. this one, the small guy here, it is better to use 2 of them in a row and to limit just a little bit, then use 1 and to limit even more. And from this trick, I've been using this also a lot on Ozone. So I'm using the vintage limiter just to increase a little bit the volume of the source signal, but not in this case because the source signal, to be honest, is way too loud. So this one is just limiting a tiny bit, as you can see. And then in the end, it's the maximizer, which is the main limiter of the Ozone. And I'm most of the time using the IRC4 algorithm. I have no idea what these guys are doing. I'm just using this one always since years. No, before they had the 4, I was using the 3. And I'm using modern or transient. In this case, modern, because I switch and then I try to find out what is better, what is not. It's just it's like alchemy. Yeah, character is very fast here in this track, and I'm also using dithering because I don't want to use the dithering from Ableton. It's just my personal opinion, and yeah, that's it. That's the track. I hope you've learned a little bit, so check my latest EP, which I've released last Friday on Orange Recordings, and it's a 4-track EP, and this is the main track of the EP. Thank you, and bye-bye.